in St. Cloud State in the McDonald's is not easy. My dad is so mad, and then we have to break into the car. It's one of those old jalopies back in the 70s, so he had to just kind of break through the rubber to do that, but it was still hard, and it's below zero. And my dad is giving 8 curse words a second. I mean, he's ready to pop. And finally we get in there. He heads home. He tells me before he leaves, make sure that you stay close to me and follow me because I got something he wants me to do. He says, don't be late. So he takes off like a hornet. I get in the car and I lose him. He's gone. And so I'm driving home. Now, I've only been to St. Cloud State once before, and I really don't know my way home. He said, make sure that you catch the Highway 10 turnoff or something like that. So I'm driving home, and I get totally lost. Totally lost. There's one point where I have no idea where I'm going. I'm looking for signs, and there's no signs that says to St. Paul or whatever. I could be going to China for all I know. I'm getting mad. I'm getting so frustrated. It's been one of the worst days of my life. I'm in so much trouble already, and now I'm going to be lost. I start asking God. I'm a new Christian. I'm asking God, please, God, show me the way home. Give me a sign. Do something. And God's not helping me. Now, I had been, for those 6 months, really working hard at getting out of my habit of swearing. My dad was one of the most creative cursors in the universe. Could put together entire paragraphs without a single clean word. He had a very high IQ, and he used it all for cursing. What a waste. But so I grew up with that, so that was kind of my shtick. I would go on to these great metaphors in swearing. And as a disciple of Jesus, I was really trying to break that habit, and I'd been doing pretty good. But now I'm driving home, and that is starting to come up. I can just feel it, just mounting. I'm getting madder and madder and madder. And at some point, I said this out loud. You want me to swear, don't you? You're trying to get me to swear. You want me to swear? Fine, you want me to swear? I'll swear. I start pounding on the steering wheel, and then comes 30 seconds of undiluted cursing. Not the most mature moment of my life. It was like popping a pimple or something. 6 months worth of stored up swearing, just gushing out. Volcano of vile. It actually felt good, though, but in a demonic sort of way. Okay. That wasn't God doing that. Now, see, we sometimes accuse God of tempting us. I met a person rather recently who fell off the wagon and blamed God for it. He said, look, I've done 3 days of clean sobriety, and then God virtually put a beer bottle right in front of me. What was I supposed to do? And he blamed God for that. Now, here's the thing. God does not tempt us. It says this in James chapter 1. When you're tempted, no one should say, God is tempting me. For God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. But each one of you is tempted when you are dragged away by your own evil desire and enticed. God doesn't tempt anyone ever. We're tempted when we're enticed by the weaknesses and the evil desires that we've cultivated in our own life. I cultivated a lifelong habit of swearing. I did that. God didn't do that. And I was the one that didn't fill up my tank. God didn't do that. And I was the one who got lost. God didn't do that. And I was the one that locked my keys in the car. God didn't do that. That was about me. It wasn't about God. God wasn't tempting me. We're tempted by the evil that's in our heart. And there is a force out there, a cosmic force. His name is Satan. He's a roaring lion. He sets us up sometimes to be tempted, trying to get us to fall. But that's Satan, not God. And it's very important that we keep God and Satan distinct from one another. Satan tempts us. Our own evil tempts us. But God never tempts us. So whatever it means, whatever Jesus means when he says pray that God won't lead you into temptation, he doesn't mean, he can't mean, pray that God won't tempt you. Because God never tempts us. So what does it mean? Here's an explanation that I find a lot of commentators rely on but never substantiate. Maybe the passage simply means, God, don't let us fall into temptation. Don't allow us to be tempted. Protect us from temptation. That makes sense. And if that was the explanation, I could do this very quickly and move on to the next passage and preach a sermon where you're going to be running the aisles and shouting hallelujah. The trouble is, that's not what the text says. In fact, the trouble is that the text can't say that. The word for lead us in Greek is in the active voice, not the passive voice, which means it can't be translated, God, don't allow us to fall into temptation. It can't mean that. I wish it meant that. It'd make it easier if it meant that. I always pretty much assumed up until this last week that it must mean something like that, but it can't mean that. And we've got to deal with the text. Don't you hate that? We actually have to deal with the text. So it can't mean that. So what does it mean? Maybe we'll make headway on cracking this nut by looking at the word temptation instead of the word lead us. Actually, the word lead us, it literally means to carry. God don't carry us into temptation or into testing. Let's look at the word temptation. The word is perosmos in Greek. And I want you to remember that word, perosmos. And that word can mean either temptation or it can mean testing. And what determines what it means is the motivation of the one doing it. If I'm doing perosmos with you with the goal of having you fall, that's a temptation. I'm tempting you. But if I'm doing perosmos with you with the goal of having you succeed, that's a testing. God never tempts us because he never wants us to fall. But he does test us because he wants us to succeed. In fact, you'll find that testing happens all over the place in the Bible. Let me give you one example. Deuteronomy chapter 8. This is Moses speaking to the children of Israel. Moses says, remember how the Lord your God led you all the way in the wilderness these 40 years. And the reason he did that was to humble you and to test you in order to know. He wanted to know what was in your heart, which is to say he wanted to know whether or not you would keep his commands. That's why God tests us. He humbled you, causing you to hunger and feeding you with manna, which neither you nor your ancestors had ever known before. He was doing that to teach you that people do not live by bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. In the 40 years that the children of Israel were in the wilderness, God would feed them by having manna, bread, fall down from heaven. But he only gave them a day's worth. And he told them, never collect more than what you need for that one day. And if they did that, they passed the test. If they didn't, they failed the test. And the reason the Lord was doing that was he was trying to teach them. He was trying to free them from their slave mindset and free them to be people who trust him and to walk as children of the Most High God. Coming out of Egypt, they'd been in slavery for 400 years. And what sometimes happens when people are in slavery, or what is virtually the same thing, in abject poverty, what that can do to some people is it makes you insecure about the future, so you hang on to everything today. You want to hoard things today because you don't know about the future. My stepmother was like that. She came out of the Great Depression, and that did something to her mind because she didn't know what the future holds. She would just conserve everything. I mean, everything. She rationed how much toilet paper we could use when we had a bowel movement, and it was absurd. Everything had to be rationed, and she hated spending any kind of money. You got to save, and she was a pack rat, and it was just ridiculous. My dad also went through the Depression. But it had the exact opposite influence on him. He said, he thought, since we don't know if we're going to have money tomorrow, we better spend it now. And so he always wanted to buy stuff. And boy, did they have an interesting marriage. Well, see, God was testing them, and he was really saying, will you trust me? Will you trust me? Will you trust me? He was trying to teach them to get out of the slave mindset and have more of a trusting God mindset because he was equipping them for service. He wanted them to go into the promised land, and that was going to have historic repercussions about God's plan for all of world history. But it won't do a bit of good if you put them in the promised land and they're still thinking like slaves. He's got to transform their minds. So he was teaching them and testing them, always asking, are you ready yet? Are you ready yet? Will you walk with me? Will you obey my commands? Will you, in fact, trust me? He was preparing them for kingdom service. It's no different than what parents do, or at least what parents should do. If you're a smart parent, you give your kids, within reason, some freedom to make decisions. If kids don't have the power to make bad decisions, they don't have power to make morally relevant good decisions, and they never learn how to do that. I've known some people who try to do risk-free parenting, where you just insulate your kids and keep them from every kind of decision out there in the world. And more often than not, folks, that backfires. Kids need to grow, and they need to be put in situations where their character is tested. My wife and I always had a policy that we would always default to trust. We'll trust our kids until they give us a reason not to. And so we empower them to make decisions until they give us reasons not to do that. My oldest daughter, Danae, who is a whole lot like me, for better or for worse, is a good example of this.